I will call the April 20, 2021 meeting of the Woodbridge Board of Education to order at 7:02 p.m. with a reminder to all those watching and participating to kindly mute your microphones at this time to avoid background noise. Thank you. This evening, I am delighted to introduce SCASA Student Award recipients Shane Grogan and Luke Lamore to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance for this evening. Welcome, Shane. Welcome, Luke. Happy to have you here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, boys. We were happy to have you here this evening. Dr. Budd?
Yes,
you would like to recognize our two students this evening.
I would like to do that. I want to commend for the Board of Education and the entire community this evening's leaders of the Pledge of Allegiance, Shane Grogan and Luke Lamore, who are two of this year's South Central Area Superintendents Association, SCASA, Student Recognition Award winners. As I mentioned at our meeting last month, each year, each local superintendent is able to honor a small number of sixth grade students who have gone above and beyond in three categories. First, community service and service to others. Second, academic prowess. And third, leadership to the school community. This year, over 36 nominations of feature sixth graders were received, and the selection committee faced a significant challenge. But as you'll continue to see tonight, these particular sixth graders rose to the top. So I'd like to first tell you a little bit about Shane Grogan in his own words. So Shane has continuously demonstrated academic excellence, most recently scoring in the top 10 percentile nationally on STAR reading. In addition to academics, Shane is passionate about giving back to the community and serves as a regular volunteer and advocate for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. Over the past few years, Shane has helped raise thousands of dollars for diabetes research, and in 2016, Shane and his team were awarded the top New Family Fundraising Team Award. Shane also volunteers for the Audubon Alliance for Coastal Water Birds, helping to monitor threatened shorebirds and educate the public regarding the importance of preservation. Shane also enjoys playing basketball and baseball and recently helped his basketball travel team win their division in the Milford Hoops basketball tournament. Shane was also key to the Beth Wood 10U All-Star baseball team that brought the first district championship to Woodbridge in many years. In addition, Shane is an avid birder and a member of the Connecticut Ornithological Association. Please join me, everyone, in congratulating Sean for being one of this year's recipients of the SCASA Award and in recognizing his parents, Mr. Mark and Ms. Joan Grogan. And I believe Shane, Ms. Piazzik, would like to say a few words, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Budd. I would just like to thank all my teachers throughout the years, especially Mrs. Trofimchik for nominating me for this awards, and of course the entire nursing staff, and especially Nurse Ashling for taking care of me throughout the years.
Thank you very much, Shane. Now we'll switch over, and I'll come over on this side, and we'll move over to Luke Lamore right over here. And so I'd like to tell you a little bit about Luke in his own words. At age 11, Luke Lamore is already a published author with the children's book entitled Jimmy Carter, From the Peanut Life to the Presidency. Since that publication, Luke has participated in Woodbridge's Talented and Gifted program, Math Counts, Scholastic Kids Press, Scholars Club, one keynote address, and other public speaking events. Luke is also very fond of stop motion animation and has a channel called Luke's Historical Stories with the goal of publishing at least 7 seasons of his series. Luke strives to keep publishing articles, learn the name of every country in the world, and go to the diamond level for Scholars Club. And I would ask you all to please join me in congratulating Luke for being another of this year's recipients and in recognizing his parents, whom you can't see, but are also in the room with me, Mr. Gibson and Ms. Muriel Lamore. And Luke also is prepared to say a few words.
I just think it's just a pleasure to be here, and I thank Mr. Budd and the committee for acknowledging me to this moment.
Thank you very much, Luke. This is the best part of the year, this opportunity to really celebrate some of the excellent students at Beecher. And Ms. Piazzik, it's been a pleasure to get to know Shane and Luke and their families a little bit more this evening at a little dinner we had here before the board meeting. And I can tell you that as representatives of Beecher in so many great ways, these are just a great testament to the generations of rich legacy that these boys and other students at Beecher will take with them. So thank you for letting us recognize them this evening.
Dr. Budd, thank you. And I too would like to thank Shane and Luke for coming this evening and participating in our board meeting. And I have told them personally during my few minutes with them and their families what a credit they are to our community. Not just to Beecher Road School, but to the entire town of Woodbridge. We're so proud of you boys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Piazzik.
And so now I'm going to just ask for our viewing audiences and the Board of Education's indulgence for a moment while Dr. Budd relocates. And then we'll continue on with our agenda for the evening. So he will be leaving the location he's currently in, coming to another undisclosed location at Beecher Road School, and he'll be with us in one moment. We're moving on in the agenda to 1.4 correspondence. Ms. Genovese, any correspondence this evening?
Hi, Lynn. No, there was no correspondence to the board this month. Thanks.
Thank you. 1.5 public comment. Marcia, can you see if there's anyone who has their hand raised?
I'm not seeing any, Lynn.
I don't either. So thank you very much. I'll skip the statement about public comment at this time, and we'll move on to 1.6 in the agenda. I'm very happy to welcome once again this month to our Board of Education meeting, the Honorable Beth Heller, our first select person, who has a proclamation to read to us this evening. Welcome, Beth, and thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Dr. Budd. Thank you, Chairman Piazzik, and members of the Woodbridge Board of Education for giving me the honor and the privilege of delivering this proclamation this evening on behalf of the Woodbridge Board of Selectmen and also the citizens of Woodbridge. I believe Dr. Budd has the original copy. I'm reading a copy of that one. You have the original. There we go. Can't read from here, so I have a cheat sheet. Thank you. Regarding Teacher Appreciation Week is the title. Whereas the teachers of our country have performed as true heroes during this past year of the ongoing pandemic, and whereas the teaching staff at Beecher Road School has daily and faithfully met the many academic, social, and emotional needs of Woodbridge's children, and whereas their ongoing dedication, along with that of the administrators and support staff, Beecher Road School has maintained the highest quality of education and commitment to Woodbridge and its children that draws residents to our town. Now, therefore, I, Beth Heller, First Selectman of the Town of Woodbridge, declare May 3rd through May 7th, 2021, as Teacher Appreciation Week in Woodbridge, Connecticut, dated at Woodbridge, Connecticut, this 23rd day of April, 2021. And there's a signature on there and the Woodbridge mark. Yes. Thank you so much. My honor. Thank you.
Beth, thank you so much. I applaud everyone.
Me too.
And I do have to say that one of the things that was so very heartwarming when I met with those two young men tonight and their families was to hear the wonderful things that they had to say about the Beecher Road School teachers and staff, the support that they've been given this year, and they're commending the teachers, the administration, the nursing staff, the teacher assistants, everyone, because we were all in this together, and everyone has done such a remarkable job. So I thank you, Beth, for acknowledging our teachers' work this year. And as I said, I commend each of them for their contributions to our school. So thank you very much for that. And Beth, thank you again for joining us.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
We're moving on to 2, which is the consent agenda. Is there anything that the board wishes to extract from tonight's consent agenda? Okay, I don't see anyone wishing to extract anything. Can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I have a question. Are we going to discuss things that are on the consent agenda if we don't extract them, or they just get accepted?
Dan, ask your question again so I can hear it, please.
If we don't extract something from the consent agenda, can we not discuss it at all?
That's correct.
All right, then I'll extract the policies.
Okay, so we are extracting policy 2.5.1.5114 and policy number 2.5.2 from the consent agenda. So I will now need a motion to accept the consent agenda without the acceptance of those policies for 30-day review. Do I have that motion? Somebody on the board?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Jeff.
Lynn, this is
Second
the
motion.
suspension policy?
That would be the suspension and expulsion policy and the travel and quarantine policy. Okay, so Jeff Hughes made the motion. Dan, you're seconding that motion? Okay. I'm just going to remind the Board of Education that according to our bylaws, the bylaws of the board, policy 9325.21, which discusses consent agenda, says that any board member can remove something from the consent agenda. And I'm going to It says, however, if any board member believes that any item on the consent agenda requires discussion, that board member may remove the item from the consent agenda merely by requesting that that be done. So, all those in favor of the rest of the consent agenda? If you could raise your hand so I don't have to call the roll. I think that's unanimous, Marcia. Thank you.
I'm sorry, so Lynn, what happens now?
So
with
now
that
those two
policy?
30-day review policies will move to the policy committee on the agenda. And we'll discuss them when we get to 3.7 policy committee report.
Is there a deadline for accepting these policies?
Well, we'll vote on whether they'll go for 30-day review when we get to the policy committee after discussion. Item 3.1, PTO update. Joy, are you giving the PTO update this month?
I am. Sorry I missed last month's meeting. Sure Maria did a great job filling you all in on what we've been up to. We've been very busy. We have been working really hard on updating our bylaws and also kind of going through a restructure, if you will. We've been a very small crew this past year, and many new members. So we're just really reimagining things, taking time to kind of do an overhaul completely, so that we're in a better position next year, and hopefully in another month or so, we'll be able to do little virtual meet and greets, likely in May and June, so that we can try to get people to come and join different PTO committees and learn about what we do. Not being able to get together in a traditional way this year has been a little challenging, but I'm super proud of what we've been able to accomplish. And as we wind up the end of the school year, there's just a ton going on. So just some updates tonight. We had class pictures in the fall, and Simon Urban photographers were trying to, they couldn't do class pictures this year, but they were going to try to do the different little thumbnail photos of each student. But there was so much kind of shifting between in-person learning and remote. Not everyone had their pictures taken. There were just too many logistical hurdles. So now the class photo of a class will not be an option. I'll be communicating that this week to the families that were expecting that type of a class photo. No one had paid extra for these photos. They were going to be free. So no refunds will be needed. I believe a lot of schools kind of ran into the same issue. So hopefully next year we'll be able to do that traditional classroom photo. We had a successful online book fair, and we are happy to report that we were able to raise $7,140 of book sales. And of that, more importantly, $2,165 was raised by parents donating specifically to the school-wide e-wallet. What we used that for was to buy books for every teacher in the school. We were able to purchase 213 books with that money. We were also able to purchase 21 books for 9 students who qualified for financial assistance this year. Typically, we give these children a $10 coupon to be used at the fair, but this year we were able to buy the students' first, second, and third choice books, provided they were available. We were very lucky and so grateful that 10 administrators and teachers submitted videos of doing read alouds and book talks. We were emailing those videos to the families throughout the 2-week virtual fair. And next year, Scholastic will be doing the in-person model only. There will be no more virtual. So we're really excited to do that again. Those are, just to give you some perspective, we typically sell, $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 worth of books during our real in-person fairs. They're very well attended. And, we couldn't get that same momentum on the virtual, but we're still really proud of the contributions that people gave to that e-wallet specifically to buy all those books for our teachers. And we are getting really excited to have our Teacher and Staff Appreciation Week that Beth just mentioned, May 3rd through May 7th. We have a lot of wonderful things planned to celebrate and honor and thank our lovely teachers and staff. We haven't been able to do much for this past year, and I hope that they'll feel the love. They're going to be having dinner on us one night, and I'm not going to give away the surprises, but there will be basically a surprise every day. Let's see. We're also working hard on our Arts Week, and this is our 14th year. Arts Week this year is the week of May 24th, and the theme is fish. Schooling together to make good things happen. We just started our Tshirt sales yesterday, and I don't know if you guys can see this, but that fish is going to be the T-shirt. They're $10, and they're on PT board. The sales have begun, and it'll be going through April 30th. So get your T-shirts. We're going to be doing a school-wide art installation. We're going to be doing Mystic Aquarium virtual field trips throughout the week. There will be a performance that we'll be announcing soon. Then we'll have our traditional arts night, but it'll be via virtual studios this year on Thursday, May 27th. So, and then of course, something to wear and think about each day like we typically do. Let's see, we have some special events to wrap up the end of the year as well. Eli Whitney Museum program will be happening this year for the 4th graders. We were happy to have RJ Julia virtual author on April 7th, Rajani LaRocca, she was the author of Red, White, and Whole for grades 5 and 6, and I hear wonderful things about that. Today as well, we were able to have more virtual authors through our Scholastic dollars that we had banked. Today was Luke Flowers with his book Surf's Up for kindergartners, and they each received his book. On May 5th, we have Rebecca Elliott, and she's the author of the Owl and Unicorn Diary books for 1st grade. And each student in the 1st grade in Mag 1, as well as remote, will be receiving a book of each, so 2 books total. On May 11th, we have Maria Scriven, who wrote Nat Enough for 5th grade, and each of them will get a book. And also on May 11th, later that day, she'll do a session for the 4th graders in Mag 4 as well. And each of them will be getting a book of that same title. We're also very busy working on 6th grade graduation. We had the shout outs for the yearbook. We're going to be getting the T-shirts together, and once we know more about what we can do for graduation this year, we're working closely with the administration to figure out how we can celebrate these children and make it special for them. let's see, school supply kits. Amy Meacham is working with all the team leaders in each grade to develop their school supply lists. I believe that's all done. And online ordering will be available soon for next school year. We're also working on our upcoming Direct Ask fundraiser, which I believe Dr. Budd will be talking about as well. And that is going to, there's going to be something about that next week. And then it kicks off May 3rd, and it will be 2 weeks where we'll be just asking and asking and asking shamelessly for money so that we can buy all the technology we need to have a really wonderful blended learning experience next year. And I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Joy, thank you so much. It always amazes me, the generosity of the PTO and your support of the Beecher Road School community. You guys are just amazing. Thanks for everything that you do. Moving on to 3.2, Superintendent's Report, Dr. Jonathan Budd.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I want to start this evening by paying tribute to Maria Akampora, who later this week will be leaving her position as our Payroll and Benefits Administrative Assistant for the district. As I know you appreciate, the work of payroll and benefits is very detail-oriented. And Marie has been a master of that detail, and at the same time, has been very friendly and patient in supporting every member of the Beecher Road staff, myself included. So we will miss Marie's work for the district. We wish her all the best in her future endeavors. I want to confirm that the official last day of school this year for the Woodbridge School District will be Monday, June 21st, 2021, which will be an early release day. As Joy mentioned, a graduation ceremony for our sixth grade students is being planned for Friday, June 18th, consistent with guidelines for such ceremonies that just came out from the State Department of Education the day before vacation. So we are working in concert with the PTO, parents, and teachers to ensure that the graduation will comply with all health and safety protocols and be a really fitting method to celebrate the achievements of all our exiting Beecher Owls. And as has been mentioned in previous meetings, this summer we will be hosting a free summer academy for students for whom data suggest that additional reinforcement of literacy and mathematics skills will be beneficial. So parents and guardians whose children meet the identified criteria will receive specific information from my office later this week. But in general, we anticipate a strong mixture of literacy and mathematics learning within a socially and emotionally supportive context that includes great fun as well. So we encourage the participation of all children who are invited to attend. But if any parent or guardian whose child is not invited believes that their child should be invited, please contact Principal Sherman for the next steps. That leads me to give an update about next year and our learning model. My office has received some inquiries related to remote learning for next year and whether it will be allowed, and I thought this would be a timely and relevant place to update the community on that. So to begin, it's important to remember that our decisions in this regard must be compliant with state statutes and regulations of the State Department of Education. And certain of those regulations were adjusted this year to allow students to learn remotely from home. And based on information I requested earlier today, a decision on this topic by the state has not yet been made. But it is expected that a decision will be made within the next weeks, perhaps even sooner. Almost certainly by the time of our May Board of Education meeting. So I am paying particular attention to this topic so the board can make the best local decisions to the extent that such is permitted. And it will be imperative that we can make clear, transparent, and informed decisions within the parameters we're given by the state, and that we communicate those decisions timely with all of Beecher's parents and guardians and staff. So I assure you that monitoring this topic is among my top priorities in the upcoming weeks, and I will communicate with all of you as soon as the state releases that information, which may be very, very soon, I'm told. And finally, it continues to be my privilege to lead Beecher Road School. With spring, warmer weather, and even the end of the school year, 43 days, on the horizon, our community can be proud that our students and staff continue the rich tradition of excellence at Beecher Road School. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Budd. Is there any board member who has any questions of Dr. Budd?
I have one.
Okay, hang on. Okay, Dan, go ahead.
So in your last comments, Dr. Budd, you mentioned about how, whether or not the state is going to give us guidance on remote learning or in-person learning. And I think one of the critical pieces of information that we needed as a Board of Education to make a informed decision was a survey from the parents. And so I just don't know if we want to start preparation now so that once we have the information from the state and the parents know what the state is recommending or not recommending, we can quickly move to getting a survey out to them to see their reaction to that. Because I think that our perception last time did not align with what the parents ended up giving us back in the survey results. So I just bring that up as a proactive kind of position.
Thank you, Dan. Joyce?
My understanding is that if we are allowed to offer remote learning, that the model that we would think about putting forward would be one where there would be blended learning, much along the lines of what we have right now. So it wouldn't be just in person or just remote, but blended learning. And that way we would have the flexibility should kids go in and out or teachers go in and out for whatever reason to accommodate the back and forth. But Jonathan, is that understanding correct as we know so far?
I think from what I've been told that decisions from the state may be fairly imminent on this. So just briefly on the idea of a survey, although I'm totally in favor of it, I think the timing may be such that by the time we got the survey out, the information might come. Legislatively and through the guidance of the state, I think one of the big decisions statewide being made is whether the state will mandate certain things for all districts, or whether it will allow local boards of education to make certain decisions. And obviously, in that case, I will come back to you with what the options are and an administrative recommendation. But we don't yet know if what may fall in that bucket of local control and what may not. And I would say from a board making policy perspective, we sort of need to know what bucket we're going to be dealing with. And it may be by the end of this week because every district is asking these same critical questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any other board questions or comments? Okay, we're going to move on to 3.2.1, technology at Beecher Road School. I see Mr. Crawford, Dr. Budd, I think you'll probably start.
Yes. I'm going to share a screen with you. Just a minute, please. Board members, this content is uploaded in e-meeting as well. Dan, you're on my screen. Just a thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, so you want to hear from the real experts on technology at BRS, Ms. Sherman, Mr. Pulo, and Mr. Crawford, who all have really important parts of this puzzle. And I will get to introduce, I will be the transition, and I'll also come back at the end. But this is our more major presentation tonight, obviously by the title, looking at technology this year and moving forward to next year. So essentially, the presentation First, deals with the financing of technology. Mr. Pulo will talk overall about technology funding sources, and then he and Mr. Crawford will look more deeply at leasing. And some of that comes we'll be reminding to you of the Finance Committee meeting from a week or so ago. And the second part of our presentation is technology to support learning at Beecher Road School. The first part of that, supporting teachers, is actually coming mostly from the Curriculum Committee presentation toward the end of March. But then we're also going to talk about supporting students. And after Mr. Pulo, Mr. Crawford, and Ms. Sherman have gone through all of this, I'll be back at the end to talk about 3 ways in which we're suggesting that technology could be enhanced even further at Beecher next year. So that leads me to move with our first topic toward Mr. Pulo, who has great numbers to present for you here. I should just say that I think it might be easier for our flow if we would hold questions till the end. If that's all right with you, Lynn, because I think that would avoid our talking about things early that come up later in a maybe confusing way.
I think that's fine. Thank you, Dr. Budd.
Well, Mr. Pulo, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Budd. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Good. Okay, so this slide before you, we thought would be very helpful. Again, as Dr. Budd just alluded, the more detailed discussion, the foundational discussions occurred during our budget meetings and certainly most recently in the Finance Committee. But what we wanted to show you with this was the limited funding mechanisms that we utilize for technology. And so the first bucket is the leasing, that which the proposal, again, we discussed at Finance, and that is the lease to purchase desktops and laptops. And there is approximately a total of $50,115. And you'll see a couple slides later on how we arrived at that and the lease term and the lease rates that got us to the $50,000, the annual funding for those components. Also included in our operating budget funding, but outside of the leasing, is for the purchasing of such items as our iPad, any smartboard and or projector replacements, and various software and supplies for that. And that totals $50,085. Outside of the operating budget, but included in the town capital budget, is $20,000, and that's what we identify as infrastructure items. And you know, the user-friendly term I use is a lot of the stuff that you can't see, a lot of the cabling and the wiring that expands our Wi-Fi access throughout the building, classrooms and various meeting areas and library media center as well. So that contains $20,000, and that is again in the FY22 capital budget. These last 2 items are outside of capital and operating, and they're what we identify as grant fundings. The recycling grant funding is as we age out our computer equipment, our printers and various devices, there is a resale market available for that. And Mr. Crawford has partnered in that initiative, and again, as the inventory becomes available, has recycled it or sold it, for which the district receives funds. The most recent wave of recycling funding is $4,812. Lastly, there has been grant funding afforded. It's not a guarantee, which is pretty much par for the course for all grant funding, but the last few years we have received an allotment under the Title IV grant funding, and that current allotment is $1,340. An example of past uses and purchases for that were the purchase of 3D goggles for the students. Something I want to call your attention to that's not on the slide, but certainly want to narrate to it. If you take these 5 funding mechanisms, all total, comes out to about $126,000. And then if you further break it down to what's funded through the board and the town's capital and operating budget, that's approximately $120,000 of the 126. So roughly 95% is funded outside of the grant, or another way of saying it is indeed we have limited funding available to us through such grant initiatives. The large lion's share is through our operating and capital budgets. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Al. And so I think you're continuing with going more deeply into the leasing.
I believe Mr. Crawford was going to cover this slide.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. And it's nice to see everyone. I feel like I've been in a few meetings recently. So I'm going to cover the next few slides, covering our current inventory of laptops, desktops, and iPads. Here's a brief overview of what we currently have in place. We have about 136 laptops with various usage right now, which are typically assigned to a teacher for the lifespan of that device. We have 134 desktop computers, which are used in the technology center, the library, the offices, some classrooms. Their rotation is a little bit different. They start their life at Beecher in the technology center or in an office, and then rotate to the library before going through a classroom location. And currently we have about 810 iPads that are used by teachers and students. We have 1-to-1 in grades 2 through 6, and we have centers of iPads in K and 1, including there's other ones that are associated with special education learning needs that we have there. The typical rotation cycle of an iPad starts with a 4th grade student. It goes with that same student for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, and then goes to a 2nd grade student for 2nd and 3rd grade before being recycled, as Al alluded to earlier. Next slide. To break it down a little bit more about the age of our current devices, I broke it into a 0 to 3 years old, 4 to 5 years old, and 6 or more years old. So if you look at how our breakdown is, our iPads, a majority of our iPads fall within that 0 to 5 years. So getting on the cusp of about 190 of those ones that are going to be recycled in the near future. A few of them are older ones that we do still have in some special education areas to go through there. Our desktops, we started a few years ago doing a replacement cycle. It was stopped. We were unable to fund it for this year. And so you can see that there is a divide between 50 newer desktop computers and a large number of older desktop computers. And the laptops, you can see we purchased a few this year due to the demand of a larger teaching staff. And then we can see the ones that we purchased a number of years ago. And then we still have a 32 that are older devices that we've used for very special projects or one-off kind of things there. So that's kind of a breakdown by age of what our current inventory is. So one of the things that we've been looking at as we've been going through how we use technology at Beecher is we're looking for a regular replenishment of our technology. So we have a consistent level in budget funding. So we don't have spikes and ups and downs. We're looking for a regular and routine replacement cycle, so we have hardware that does not become obsolete or unable to run any current software. So we had a long discussion about this in the finance committees, making sure that we are up to date and we can run such things as SBAC testing or other testing requirements like that. Some of our iPads, we've not gone with the leasing model. With iPads, we've found that doing the yearly purchase of iPads have kept us on a good replacement cycle to go through. And those are included in that operating budget. And the laptops and desktops, we can lease those, and they're on the proposed operating budget to go to lease those 2 devices there. One thing I'm going to go out before you jump in there. So one thing that we did as we proposed this new thing, if you're current events today, Apple released brand new desktop computers this afternoon, and I've been going back and forth with our sales rep with Apple. Which I've been told as of right now that pricing should be very similar. So if you do see the news later that new iMac computers were released, we are trying to make sure we get the numbers very similar to what we have proposed here. What I'm being told is that they're very comparable within $100 or so of the total cost right now, but I'm still working on getting final numbers for that.
Thank you, James. So this slide before you is the final recommendation. And how did we arrive to this recommendation? When we initially explored leasing, we looked at terms. So we started as minimal as 3 years. We looked to go out for 7 years. They do not offer a 7-year lease, but they do offer a 6-year lease. Then within each of the models, we looked to see what the cost of money was and what we were able to afford. And subsequent to some earlier finance subcommittee discussions, we also looked at, instead of doing the full 100% purchase needed equipment, to perhaps spread that out over 2 cycles to avoid the potential risk of having 100% obsolete equipment. So when all of those factors and criteria came into consideration, the 5-year lease, specifically the $50,115 annual investment, is where we landed as a final recommendation, primarily because of the pros that you see listed before you. It allows us for a consistent budget, so we know for the next 5 years that's going to be that placeholder for that line item. It also allows us better operational management, having devices that are the same age. And last but not least is the cost of money is favorable in this plan. It's less than 1% financing. So all of these factors weighed heavily into our consideration. And again, we did look at several options before landing on this decision.
So much as I love talking about the financing, and certainly James and Al have done an outstanding job as always, I think the financing of things is great if it supports great teaching and learning. So we're going to hope to say that these investments that are being made are providing strong integration for our teachers of technology and ultimately for our students. So I go back to James, and I know Principal Sherman's coming in at some point with this too, but perhaps are you starting, James, here?
Yep. So one of the things that we started looking at and we have adopted is the ISTE standards for teachers. So these are the 2016 ISTE standards. They've been adopted by the Connecticut State Department of Education in 2018 as the technology standards for teachers there. So they focus on areas such as educators being learners, educators being leaders in technology, educators being a responsible digital citizen, educators working collaboratively using technology, educators focusing on designer and designing authentic learning activities for students, educators facilitating technology to support student achievement, and analyzing, so being an analyst of data and to drive their instruction to go through. So these are standards that we've been using to drive our recent professional development for teachers and look at how we can improve our teachers' understanding of technology and how it can impact their teaching of students positively. So some of the technology opportunities that we are giving to teachers recently, we've been doing co-teaching for a number of years. We're providing professional development. So that happens on PD days, which we had recently on March 19th. We also attend grade level team meetings. There's also a number of one-on-one trainings, which has been something that's been happening a lot this year, depending on teachers' individual needs to adjust to the new teaching that we've been going through in the last year. We also have a number of self-directed learning resources developed by the technology staff and other members of the school faculty. And there's other additional opportunities provided by both the Library Media Center staff and the STEAM specialist. Go through. In the classrooms, almost all teaching spaces have a smartboard, a document camera attached to that smartboard. Teachers have laptops, which we mentioned earlier. Some teachers have iPads, or students have iPads or centers of iPads. We still have a number of iPods still hanging around for some special uses. And as Mr. Pulo mentioned, we have been recently got some VR goggles that have allowed some great what's called a Google Expedition. So while we can't leave the school, students can leave the school virtually and explore some places all around the world. So I think Principal Sherman might want to chime in a little bit about our recent March 19th PD Day.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for allowing us to be here with you and talk about some of the technology at Beecher Road School. So we recently had a full day professional development opportunity for all of our staff. And we actually started with focusing in on how to really foster deep learning using technology. And we built off of the information and the tools and the resources that we already had and took our learning and our knowledge and our instructional practice a little bit further. And then the afternoon part of the training was not around technology as much. It was a little bit of a different topic, but the morning really gave us a nice long opportunity. And we were very grateful to have Mr. Crawford and Mr. Liglio there supporting, along with Jackie Whiting, who helped a lot of our staff members and has been working closely with our fully remote teachers. So it was a really great learning opportunity day, and it really set the stage for future learning opportunities with all of our staff.
So recently, before vacation, we also did a survey in part with Apple. It's done, it was originated by the Stanford Research Institute, and it was a quick teacher survey that looked at how teachers perceive technology, their sense of preparation using technology, their professional learning goals, how they perceive student practices using technology, and the types of student learning products produced with technology tools that we have at school. So these survey results have come back fairly recently, so those are going to be shared with the PDEC committee to further digest the results as they came through.
This leads, I think, into the most interesting part, to actually the students doing some things with technology. Dave?
So as we saw with the teachers, students also have ISTE standards, and this is where a lot of our technology classes and the technology use in school is driven. So you can see most of these standards echo exactly what the teachers are given. So we're looking about becoming innovative designers, creative communicators, knowledge constructors, computational thinkers, digital citizens, empowered learners. So how are we taking our active role in our learning? And a global collaborator. So how can we use our digital tools to spread our learning and collaborate with others, both locally and afar from us? Again, these were from 2016 and adopted in 2018 by the State Department of Ed. So one of the things, this is kind of a brief look at into the technology curriculum and how we teach. So you can see we break down each one of those standards in each section of and lesson and unit that we teach in the technology department. So that's myself and Mr. Alleglio. We look at how are we addressing each of those standards. So some of these things that we're addressing in the classroom or in the technology area when the students come for specials. So this is just kind of an inside look about how we plan and how we address each standard throughout the grade levels. So for students, we have scheduled technology classes as part of the regularly scheduled specials period, but there's also non-scheduled times where we interact with students and teachers. So there's that co-teaching that I mentioned between technology specialists and the classroom teachers. There's collaboration between the technology specialists and specialists in STEAM, the health, library media, DARE, and other things. So something like digital citizenship is something that we cover in a variety of areas, both in the technology lab, but also in something like DARE for that thing. We support language learners going through. We have an open tech lab for both 5th and 6th grade students that go through. And then in a normal year, we also have the WBRS news that we do with our 6th grade students that's shared throughout the school.
So as much as I love data and numbers and pretty colorful charts, what I love even more is being able to share with you the work that the students are doing. Guided by, of course, our technology department. So the picture that you're looking at here are some of our youngest learners, our kindergarten students. And the beautiful thing about technology learning at Beecher is that we really start at the kindergarten level by creating some really essential foundational skills for all of the students. And those skills are building blocks that help them to grow and learn in future grade levels. So they learn hardware and software things. So they'll learn things in kindergarten, such as mouse and keyboarding skills, and the use of an iPad, the use of a smartboard. And one of the very first lab projects that they do in kindergarten includes the exploration of some databases. So they learn some site navigation, and they get to create a class book on their favorite animals. They then, after that project, they transition into some beginning coding, which is the pictures that you're looking at right now. And they start to learn coding vocabulary. They learn sequences. They learn properties and variables and loops and conditions. They learn all these things through this program that you're seeing. And as they are learning this, they are reinforced as the students progress. In the next grade, in first grade, they build on some of those skills. And what you'll see here is that they are continuing to code, and this time they are using basic robotics. So they are actually hands-on. You can see they're very engaged in this task, and they are using what's called a B-bot to work collaboratively to solve problems. And here in these pictures, they're getting their B-bots to travel to different grids on the board. Now, this year, because of COVID restrictions, there was actually a digital B-bot choice board, and that allowed both our in-person and our remote learners to have an equitable experience. And I actually got to watch the students working through the B-bot exploration that they were engaging in. And it was so much fun to watch them problem solve and think about how to navigate their B-bot from one location to another, and watch them as they did a lot of guessing and checking. They tried one code, they would have to erase it and fix it and look back at where they made a mistake. And it was a really, really engaging process. And they were so proud of themselves when their little B-bot got to the location it needed to get to. Second grade students, they focus a lot on keyboarding. Now, this is, as you know, a really essential skill in the world that we work on today. So they spend a lot of time typing in second grade using a program called Typing Agent. The program is self-paced and individualized, but it does allow for some customization. So students can customize their progress based on their progress. And there's interactive games that the students get to play as they reach different levels. And there's also a really nice community feeling as the classes sort of work together to advance and get further along. They also get the opportunity in second grade to go back and revisit some of the programs that they learned about in younger grades. And now that they are just a little bit older and they have a little bit more experience, they experience some of these programs in different and new ways. In third grade, we start to really combine even more literacy and technology, and they really focus on building technology skills through project-based learning. So during the year, they work a lot on word processing skills and presentation skills in third grade. They learn to add texts, they change fonts, they change the sizes of the fonts, they change the colors, they add images, they manipulate those images, and they create original artwork in third grade. So they're really focusing, another one of our big technology goals is really on creating. So they're really focusing on that creating standard that Mr. Crawford mentioned earlier. They also dive a little bit deeper into coding, which they have now been working with for the last couple of years. And now in third grade, they're using block-based coding called Scratch. Scratch builds on the foundational skills that they learned in earlier grades. And the program, it's more advanced, and it allows the students to really customize some of the concepts that they have learned earlier. So they end the year in third grade with an introduction to 3D printing, which culminates with every student creating a model in the 3D printing lab that they then get to take home. So 2 years ago, actually, with Arts Week coming up, I'm kind of glad that got mentioned earlier, because 2 years ago, that third grade project was tied into Arts Week, which had the theme of water. So students in third grade 2 years ago designed boats based on some basic engineering principles, and then they actually tested those boats in a kiddie pool outside the third grade classrooms. So it was a really nice integration of technology, 3D printing, some of the third grade ISTE standards, and our Arts Week theme of water that the third graders got to engage in a couple of years ago. And then in fourth grade, which is the final year of dedicated technology classes, it is all about digital citizenship. So in fourth grade, the students really start learning even more about online safety and internet searching. They start talking about personally identifiable information. It's always fun when your child comes home and tries to grill you and find out what she can find out, and make sure that you're not sharing stuff you're not supposed to be sharing. They also learn about malware and phishing attempts. They learn about cyberbullying in 4th grade. So they learn all of these digital citizenship skills. There's a lot of ways that they go about this, both individually and group activities. This year, they all had to be modified, of course, to allow the students to maintain social distancing and to keep everybody safe. So they've done a lot of Google Meets and breakout rooms this year to accomplish some of those skills. And in 4th grade, they end the year with a capstone project where the students actually create a presentation on everything that they have learned, and they share that information with their peers. And this is also really fun. I remember 2 years ago, there were some students who were making videos. There were some students who were making Google slide presentations. So the way that they choose to present their information is also differentiated, and the students get to really engage with all of their technology learning to present the things that they learned during 4th grade during this digital citizenship unit. It's really nice that Mr. Crawford and Mr. Pulo allowed me to talk through all that exciting learning. I'm going to actually turn it back over to Mr. Crawford because these pictures that you're seeing here were really his inspiration, and I know caused a lot of excitement and joy both for him and for the students.
So one of the things we've recently been doing in 5th and 6th grade is having an open studio. So you might have heard about the open studio. For art, we've mirrored that in the tech lab now and having different days go for different things in the tech lab. So we've done coding days, we've done bot days, we've done animation days, we've done a variety of different things. So in the pictures here, you can see some cubelets, which are little robots where the students can combine them together to do different things, either light up, make sounds, move around, really explore which each sensor can do. We also have some students who are very interested in coding. So we were doing language-based coding. So Ms. Sherman nicely said how we move from directional coding to block-based coding to, for our upper grade students, doing the language-based coding. So that would be something like a Python type language or JavaScript. So we've been doing a variety of those. So really getting a smaller group of students who can come up during that open studio time and kind of explore a little bit deeper something that they're really interested in to go through. Another thing that we've been doing in the classroom, and you can see this is from past year, that we did these VR goggles. So as I mentioned, these Google Expeditions have been a great addition to both the science and social studies curriculum, where students can really travel to different places. So if you're looking about different biomes, you can travel to the desert or to the ocean or to wherever it may be, and get a sense of where you're, what you're studying about and what you're reading about. So you can actually see Ms. Trifimchik there in her role last year as a STEAM teacher helping guide one of these expeditions. And currently what's going on and how technology is being used, it's being used a variety of ways. So we took some quick pictures around the school today, and you can see that technology is being used in every classroom. So iPads are on the desk, students are connecting, students are presenting up on the board. In one class, you can see our blended learning environment where remote students are on the smart board with their peers getting to see and interact with them. So technology is being used throughout every classroom in the building, throughout every grade, especially now during the year that we've had.
And so to say a few key things about our principles moving forward to 2021-22. The first I would emphasize is that we know that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed foundationally many things about education. It has confirmed the relevance of good technology integration for students and teachers of all years. It has confirmed that we need to have strong professional development that's both consistent, but at the same time differentiated based on teachers' different needs. And so actually, our presentation to you as a district at the May meeting, one of the two presentations will be on professional development, reviewing it this year and moving forward to next year. But a key element of that is this top bullet on this slide, which is as James mentioned before, getting a strong needs assessment, seeing what our learning model will be like and its inclusion of blended learning, and using the best practices in professional development to meet staff needs. Related to that, but also a little bit different, is to assure technology integration for students in some ways that maybe haven't been done so far, including a term that may be familiar to many of you, a makerspace, where students, in a simple way of talking about it, can get together and do things with technology. It builds on that nice open studio concept Mr. Crawford talked about earlier, and finding ways to say that we've done some excellent things with our students with technology, but we can always revise those and look for the next best frontiers. And then finally, we're going to have the opportunity to do a strategic refocus of our library media center and our technology department, which I frankly really see as one united department with some different emphasis areas based on different personnel backgrounds, strengths, etc. But that we want to see these as a district, I would say, the Library Media Center and the Technology Department as really integrated with each other and really thinking about how technology is one type of media that can be used to access learning. And there's some really great work that can continue in that regard. So there'll be more discussion about this as well as we think about that department's best framing for next year. So I'm going to end this the way I've ended some other presentations, and at the risk of being trite, I'm going to say that the people you've heard from are just a small example of just the outstanding things happening here at Beecher Road School. And it's led in this case by really strong administrative leadership of Ms. Sherman, really strong business leadership of Mr. Pulo, strong technology leadership of Mr. Crawford. However, many, many other people on the team also playing a vital hand, giving a vital hand. So at any rate, so the topics we've discussed, I will stop sharing the screen. And I think Ms. Piazek, if you're interested, we're really interested in hearing comments, questions, etc. Lynn, you may.
I'm
There you
hoping
are.
you can hear me, Doc.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank you, Dr. Budd, and Ms. Sherman, Mr. Pulo, Mr. Crawford, for that very comprehensive look at technology. Thank you very much for your work. So we'll have questions and comments. Joyce, do you want to start if you have any questions or comments?
Sure. Thank you so much. I really loved hearing about all the different kinds of technology education that's happening through the grades. It's very exciting. I guess I just have a few things I wanted to say. One is, and I think you all are very mindful, but I think it's just worth mentioning that we want to be mindful of how much how young people, how young children learn best. And so my understanding is that very young children do better with tactile learning versus digital learning. Now, in a COVID world, we really didn't have much choice. And I know that you think a lot about these issues, but I just wanted to put that out there. I think we also want to be mindful of how much screen time our kids are getting. This technology is wonderful to have. So I'm not at all saying that we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying we just want to be mindful about the balance that we want our kids to have. One other thought that I had with all the keyboarding with Google Docs and such, it's a great tool. But what I have seen, at least with my kids, is that they rely so much on autocorrect that I'm not sure that they are really learning as much spelling and grammar as they should, because everything is fixed for them. So I just kind of put that out there. I don't know if there's a way that we could address that issue. And then my last point was about the upper grades, because the students at in the upper grades are really at that point where they can do a lot with technology. And I think it's really very cool that we have the open studio. That's wonderful for the kids that want to go a little deeper in technology. But it seems like it's an elective, and I wonder if we could think about ways where we could actually require, in the same way that we require technology learning in the younger with the younger grades, that we would for fifth grade and sixth grade also have technology, like a technology class, not just something that they can opt into, but something that they are exposed to. Because if we think about it, very few professions today are untouched by technology. But thank you again. I thought that was really great, very exciting, and love to hear it all.
Thank you, Joyce. David, do you have any comments or questions?
Just a big thank you. It's inspiring to hear what the team is doing, and I appreciate all the hard work.
Thanks, David. Dan?
Yes, I have a couple of comments. So stepping back to the financial part of this, as a member of the Finance Committee, first off, I want to say thank you. And I want to thank everyone for all the presentations during the Finance Committee, because it flushed out a lot of questions I had. And so now I can just make a few comments to emphasize a few points. And one of the comments I want to make is that I think that this is the best recommendation that is presented to us after evaluating everything that was given. I just wanted to say that there is an escape hatch inside this leasing agreement that at year 2 or 3, if the cost of money stays low at like 0.9 annual financing, then we can opt to sell half of our devices and enter into a new leasing agreement for half the devices, so that they don't all expire at the 5-year point. Because I think, and maybe James or Al can comment, the ideal spread would be to have 50-50 or 33% kind of devices in age, so that they don't all expire at the same time. Now, if we're going to stick with the leasing model forever and we go through 5-year cycles, that's okay. But I just, it was a fear that I had as someone who's part of the Finance Committee, and I just wanted the town and the citizenship at large to know that we're not locked in to this 5-year leasing agreement. We do have an escape clause that we can buy it out at any time if that's the fiscally responsible thing to do. And so thank you all for investigating that, and thank you for everything else you've done.
Thank you, Dan. I noticed Mr. Pulo shaking his head. So I think he's confirming exactly what you said. Mr. Pulo, do you have anything you want to add?
No, thank you, Lynn. I'm sorry. But yes, what Dan had narrated is pretty much his version of escape hatch is what's officially known as an option to upgrade during the term of the lease. But all roads lead to the same outcome, that if there, for whatever reason, cost of money or development of technology, there is that out that we're not committed to the 5 years. There's still going to be some financial commitment, because keep in mind, Apple is the bank in this transaction, so they are making the investment of the quantity that we order. But simple answer is yes, there is an option, depending on what unknown variables tomorrow may bring, that do give us some recourse for alternate considerations.
Thanks, Al, for that clarification. Jeff Townsend, do you have anything you would like to add? He's all set. Okay. Jeff Hughes, anything you want to add?
No, just a quick thank you. Awesome work, team. The cost of leasing is incredible too. So you guys did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, anything from you?
I just want to thank the team also. Thank Al and Dr. Bud and Lisa and James. Good job. I was just thinking out loud to myself. It would be, because many of the strategies that their students are learning are things that my contemporaries need to learn, because I'm like the font size, the size of the, the different fonts and the different ways of using the phone, even just the phone, because a lot of people don't even know how to copy and paste and do a lot of things with the phones. And I was wondering if maybe you can collaborate with the senior center and have some of the students that are technologically savvy work with some of the seniors to teach them how to do some of these things. So it's just a thought, maybe something to consider in the future. And the other thing I noticed in some of the pictures, I noticed that there were like laundry baskets next to the desks. Are those like lockers? Are they used as lockers? Okay, I was just wondering.
A little bit this year. It's new this year because of COVID. Trying to keep everyone's stuff sort of contained and near them, so there's not a lot of traveling around the rooms. And yeah,
very creative, very creative. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you very much.
So Laura, being that we're in a similar generation, James and I have talked about that many times, about some collaboration with the senior center and having intergenerational work going on. So I know that's in the back of James's mind.
It's building leadership and it's building service, and I'm very supportive of both of those leadership building descriptors. So very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Megan, do you have any comments or questions?
Just really quickly, it was a great presentation, very much appreciated. It's great to hear some of the wonderful things going on at Beecher. I know this is a little slice of all that you guys do all the time, so thank you for that. I guess I wanted to echo quickly, and I know it's you guys, I think, are already mindful of this, but I agree with Joyce that it's always good to, I think, to be finding that balance of screen time and age-appropriate learning. You said it very well, Joyce, so I won't dive into that too much. But another thing I just wanted to acknowledge was that I love that our students begin coding in kindergarten. I think that's amazing and it's fun. They love it, and it's such a great skill for the future. So I really love that that's part of the curriculum of Beecher. So thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And I echo that as well. Mike.
Yeah, I really appreciated that presentation. So thank you for that. And I really love this idea that Laura brought up and Lynn mentioned as well, of supporting the senior center and linking our kids to them and having them teach them some of the skills. I mean, it teaches our kids a lot of really important lessons around leadership and service and social skills as well. I've been observing my son over the past year. He's been really into Scratch and has learned a ton over this past year, to a point that I can't even help him with it anymore. He's beyond my skill level, but he really enjoys teaching other people what he's learned, and it kind of forces him to think about how to best convey information to another person. He loves it, and the kids he's met with and talked to love it. And I think that kind of that same process would work well with the senior center. I think it's a win-win for everyone. So
how to convey information to a very different person, right? Because
yes.
Like there's such an age gap between this.
Yeah. And the other thing I really love is the vision of moving kids to more language-based coding by the time they're in 6th grade, because I do think that that's just going to become even more of an essential skill in the future. It's already becoming that now, and I think the earlier we can prepare kids for that world we're in and moving more towards, the better.
Thanks, Mike. James, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to say anything about some historically, maybe some work with the senior center, and that these are some things that have happened in the past, but
So we've done a variety of things with town, depending on, COVID has kind of changed everything. But my predecessor, Rick Wood, did things with kind of introducing the senior citizens to the internet and to computers and going through that. And there used to be a long time ago when computers were coming online about what is an email address, what does it mean to have and to have those conversations. So we've looked at this again. Mr. Alleglio and I have batted around to the idea, as some of you have mentioned, doing some of these fourth grade presentations to a wider audience. So what is phishing? What is malware? What are these words? And making the things that the kids have learned and sharing them with that broader audience in some sort of way that we can work out. So yeah, so we've looked at that, and we've also done some of this training. Laura and Lynn, you both say you're of a certain generation, but there's a lot of this training that we've also done with our staff. So some of the staff members laughed when I gave them a booklet last year, and it was internet safety for senior citizens. And it goes through, and the staff members laughed at it, but we started going through it all and being like, how do you construct a safe password? Or how do you stay safe when you're shopping online? So it's not just a certain generation that needs some of this information. There's a lot of people who are, to use the word, a digital immigrant, who are not used to it and need a little bit more education. So there's a wide variety of, I think, opportunities for our students to share their knowledge with others. And I know, Lynn, we've talked about a lot of opportunities that the expertise that Beecher has in just basic internet safety that we could share with other town members, either through the Senior Citizen Center or through the town library or options like that. So they're all things that we have considered and just trying to work out how they are feasible to do.
James, thanks. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but you have such good information to share, and it's great for people in the community and on staff to hear these things, and for the Board of Education to hear them as well. And certainly, as we've learned the past 2 months, and will continue to learn with the SCASA award winners, we have great leaders, student leaders in our building, and we can really tap into their excitement and their knowledge. And so I think that's wonderful. So James, I want to thank you particularly for thinking about those things all the time. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn.
Jonathan, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I do.
To that topic?
No, I do not,
Okay.
Lynn, other than I endorse that as a great idea.
Thanks. Thank you. Again, thanks to you and Lisa, James, and Al for that really impressive presentation.
You're welcome.
Moving on to, what are we moving on to? Beecher Road School update. Ms. Sherman.
Thank you so much. So again, good evening, everybody. I'm going to be really, really quick. I want to mention something that already got mentioned a little bit earlier, but I want to just say that we came off of April break, and I will say that I visited almost every single in-person and remote classroom yesterday, and I was so amazed with the students and the teachers. They were right back into it. They were reviewing expectations. They were diving right back into work. They were reviewing content that had been taught before break, and everyone was just engaged and learning and having a really great day yesterday. So it was really, really wonderful to have people back and have all of our kiddos learning and our teachers diving right back into it all. So it made me really happy. I want to mention 2 other quick things. One is that we have Bot Day coming up on Thursday, and with the immense help of the library technology staff, including the teacher assistants and the teachers in that department, that they put together baggies for every single remote and in-person student to participate in grades 2 through 6 in creating a brush bot It's a little tiny robot that everyone is going to create, and there is a presentation that the teachers are going to follow along with. And we're going to start the day off with a live stream for everyone to participate in. This is a really cute story about a little friend here who builds a robot to help save the town. And we'll be starting our day with that. And then the students will have the opportunity to build their brush bots. Our younger students have been engaging in robot activities through art classes. So everyone is engaging in Bot Day in some different ways. That will be coming up on Thursday. Also coming up in May is our Smarter Balance testing. A letter did go home to all students in grades 3 through 6, both in person and our fully remote students. Grade 5 students will also be taking the NGSS, which is our science assessment, and that's only administered to students in grade 5. So more information about this will be coming forward in the next months or so, but just so you know, our primary goal, as always, is to really focus on supporting all of our students as they engage in this assessment. We will be administering our assessments to our in-person and our remote students. The state is really strongly encouraging that all the assessments be taken in person if possible, which is something that we will be setting up and scheduling for the remote students that are able to come in person to take the test. And for those that can't, we will be administering the assessment remotely. There will be more communication coming out about the remote assessment to all of our remote students, including a live Google Meet, so that we can provide some technology support and answer any questions that our fully remote parents might have. So that will be coming out really, really soon in the next week or so. So that will be forthcoming. That's it for me for now, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Any board members have questions of Ms. Sherman? Wonderful. Thanks again, Lisa. 3.3 on the agenda is upcoming meeting presentation for next month's board meeting. On the agenda for next month will be a presentation on professional development. A review, as Dr. Budd mentioned, a review of this past year's professional development, as well as going forward into next year, our plans for professional development, as well as a presentation on summer 2021 at Beecher Road School. So I'm going to ask board members if there's anything specific that they would like covered in either of those presentations. If you could raise your hand so that Dr. Budd could take some notes and we can make sure that those topics are covered in the presentation. Joyce.
Yes, I was wondering, you might have already done this already, but is there a recent survey of our teachers as to what professional development they think would be helpful to them?
Yes, recent, within the past 2 months, Joyce, and that would be part of the presentation in next month.
David, you didn't have your hand raised, did you? Okay. Dan.
So the only thing I would add to that is, I'm sure it's going to be in there, is any financial implications for professional development. You know, like Joyce said, what is needed is important, and how we pay for what is needed is also important. So understanding those two things.
It might, sorry.
Go ahead, Joyce.
Okay. It might also be interesting to see if it makes sense to collaborate with any of the other districts. Sometimes we get better pricing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'm just excited to see what summer brings to BRS. You know, I don't even know what's going to be in there, but I'm sure it's going to be great.
Okay, we're setting a good standard. I like that. Nice.
Oh, anyone else?
I'm sure
Okay.
this is going to be included. I'm sure that
Go
this
ahead,
would be
Laura.
included. Yeah. I would like to see more virtual training. And so, you know, I'm sure that's going to be included, but I just would like to hear more about that. Okay, thank you.
Very, very good. Yes.
Go ahead, Joyce.
I was wondering, after every PD day, do we capture feedback from the teachers as to whether they felt it was effective or not? It'd be kind of interesting.
I can't speak from personal experience to every PD day, but we have been doing that recently, yes. As well as even to some professional development that's offered in faculty meeting situations. Have a variety of ways of capturing that. So that will embed some of that as well next month for sure.
And I can just speak from experience that historically, the staff was always surveyed on professional development. So before you, Dr. Bud. Go ahead, Laura.
Obviously, during COVID, this probably did not occur. But when teachers go out for professional development days, do you require or do you ask them to come back and do presentations to the entire faculty?
Best practices that may be done, absolutely. We have not actually had anybody do that since actually go out at all since my time here because of COVID, but absolutely. And depending on the type of the type of professional development, they might be bringing that back to a grade level team, the special education teachers, the full faculty, et cetera.
Yeah, at the faculty meetings, you know, whatever.
Yeah, and I'll say that we're even doing that on
practice.
Even on professional development or learning that doesn't cost money. For example, we have a teacher in our health department who is on the BODAC, that's the regional group to prevent substance abuse, et cetera. And we've asked her to report regularly at our faculty meetings based on what happens at those meetings, because all teachers should be aware of that. That's an example.
Perfect, thank you.
Great.
Will there be any sort of discussion around to what extent would we want to, post-COVID, do online training, which is less expensive? Whether it's effective probably depends on the subject matter, but it just seems, you know, through COVID that because we've had no choice, we've had to go this route, but it in some cases might actually be just as good and certainly helps us financially as well.
Absolutely. And I think you're starting to see some professional organizations, well, certainly many moved in that direction because they had to over the past year. But some, if you see advertisements coming out for conferences in the next year, have made deliberate decisions to at least allow some virtual participation. And then that speaks to Dan's point, I think, also about the financial implications of professional development. Large national conferences that someone can attend in person, a great benefit, but can be very cost prohibitive.
Okay, I think, Dr. Bud, you probably have some direction to go with on professional development. Was there anything anyone wanted added to or covered in the summer 2021 presentation? Okay, we'll look forward to seeing both of those presentations next month. Moving on, Facilities Committee report, Jeff Hughes.
Yeah, in my absence, I asked Dan Cowan to cover for me. He'll give the presentation tonight.
I'm so sorry, Jeff. You're right.
That's okay. You have a lot on your plate.
So we had our meeting, and it was. One second, can you mute? So we had our meeting, and some of the key takeaways from the meeting was that Vito completed 50 fix-it tickets in the month of April, which is no small feat, and that does not even include sensitive maintenance issues that can't be listed, and also non-inclusive of the major HVAC repairs that I'll talk about in a moment. The other thing was that we got the signs up for all the areas that require signage for making sure people are masked and keeping their dogs leashed and such. One thing that the Board of Ed should be aware of that is going to be coming in the future is that our Jace controller, which is the major brain for all the HVAC, is overloaded and was giving us some errors. And so in the near future year or so, we might be looking at a proposal to replace that Jace or upgrade it and split it into, two brains instead of one large brain. We had a leak in the K-wing hallway on the piping, and during the shutdown, the break, they drained and repaired that. And as far as I know, there's no additional leaks from that area, so the repair was a success. However, the contractor introduced air into the system and prevented that air from being moved around by using valving, which caused our staff to lose some time and them to spend additional time on site. And I just bring this up so that our finance manager is aware that we should not receive any additional bills for that time, because that was a avoidable thing that the contractor had. They prevented the air from entering the system by closing and opening valves properly. We should never have had those extra hours onto that project. So that was kind of the contractor's fault. I actually spent some time here at the school myself in troubleshooting that issue. So finally, the filtration was changed out in the school. So we have nice, clean MERV 13 filters in all the classrooms. And that was done during the break so that we didn't interrupt the learning experience. And overall, the school is well taken care of by our facilities department, and we are very thankful for them.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. Very comprehensive report of our Facilities Committee meeting. Next Facilities Committee meeting will be Friday, May 14th at 7:30 a.m. Stay tuned. Joyce, Finance Committee report.
Okay, last night there was the town preliminary budget meeting, and there was absolutely no drama whatsoever, very few questions, very few comments. So uneventful works for us. And the next step is that the annual meeting will take place on Monday, May 17th at 7:30, and that is the last step of this whole long process. For this year's budget, we have very good news. We are projecting a surplus of just under 11,000, which is probably a little bit surprising to people, given that we started the year with such a huge deficit. But this past month, we had a favorable swing to the tune of about 45,000 in the areas of medical insurance, employee benefits, and nursing allocations. For the school lunch program, there was some good news for March. We showed an over $2,000 in income, but I think that it's unlikely that April is going to follow suit just because we've had spring break. So the year-to-date loss is about 17,000, which we would be responsible for. E-Day is running an operating loss of about 87,000, but it is expected that we're going to have enough in our fund balance to cover the. It's largely the unemployment claims. So the fund balance right now is currently at 24,000, and given that we're very close to the end of the year, I think there's going to be enough so that we wouldn't have to fund anything out of the BOE budget. Next finance meeting for May, we're going to be discussing E-Day finances. So if you're interested, you can tune in. Then, as a matter of practice, we have been looking at all kinds of potential exposures. And at the last meeting, we focused on two areas. One is legal fees, and the other is injury liability. So for legal, in the last 2 years, we have overspent our budget pretty significantly. So Jonathan walked us through some of the things, some of the steps that he has followed, processes that he's put in place to better control the costs. So looking at whether we have expertise in-house before going to outside counsel, bundling issues, making sure that there's a superintendent review of each and every invoice. There was discussion about consolidation and other payment structures like a retainer agreement, but the committee decided that it didn't make sense at this particular time to explore that further. And, maybe in the future there was talk about maybe having a bake-off among different law firms if we have a year where, the legal expenses are going to be greater than usual. For example, like in a contract negotiation year. In the area of injury prevention and management, the administration has put in place a more rigorous documentation and follow-up process. And then the last thing that we talked about was the revenue generating opportunities at Beecher, having third parties come in and use our facilities. So we decided that the next step that made sense would be for the policy committee. Sorry to give you more work, Meg. The policy committee would need to review policy 3515 over the summer, which pertains to the use of our facilities. So that would be the next step. And our thought was that any sort of after school revenue generating opportunities would kind of tie in nicely with the review of E-Day. That's it.
Thank you, Joyce. The next meeting of the Finance Committee will be Monday, May 10, I believe, at 6:30 p.m. Curriculum Committee report. Mike.
So I was absent for that last meeting, so I'm going to ask David to summarize that for me.
Sorry about that. That was the second one I blew tonight.
That's all right.
Sorry, David.
Not a problem. I think we have an easier job because we've already heard a lot about what happened at the curriculum committee. The last meeting, we were grateful for a beautiful presentation from Lisa and Jonathan looking at the data on what we've seen in the school over the past year through the pandemic, and knowing that there was going to be learning loss, but getting some really nice data to start to quantify the scope and extent and where it was taking place, and then thinking about how we can be addressing this. And that's what Jonathan's already talked about, including the summer programming. So I won't try to recover what he's already talked about, but thinking about what are the groups that have been most effective, how do we target them and help, and including through the use of the ESSER funding for summer programming, which is great. And also a beautiful presentation from James about technology, which we've also heard some of tonight. So I think I'll just say the leadership shared the same information in more depth, and it's great.
David, thanks. Thank you for that. I want to just let everyone know that the next curriculum committee meeting, I believe, is this Thursday,
Right.
April 22nd at 4:30. Now I'm going to ask any board member who had a question or comment about the facilities report, the finance committee report, or the curriculum committee report. Any questions or comments?
I have one about the curriculum.
Go ahead, Dan.
I wrote it down. Hold on, just give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So it's actually 3 questions, and I asked them at the meeting, but I was in public comment, so I never got responses. So I just bring them up again, looking for responses to them. And so the first question is, what is the correlation between grades on report cards and the kids meeting the standards for education? And I bring this up because, not that I don't think my daughter's the smartest child that ever graced the halls of Beecher Road, and she deserves every 3 that she gets, but I think that, possibly there's some nuance that I'm missing by not having all the, having multiple grades available for our kids. So just an investigation into grading and standards. Can we reduce the time that's required for Symphony Math? In my opinion, grading should be, the statistics out of Symphony Math should be based on competency and not just putting effort or time logged into an app. And then is there a software that the district could invest in that could visualize and anonymize the data of the children's grades with zero to no effort from the administration for the purposes of reporting out to the Board of Ed in a standard and regular format so that we can see kind of in real time what's going on with the students throughout the year and year to year, but you know, without putting additional effort onto the administration. And finally, what additional data do we need to determine that we are educating the children in the school in the core concepts of reading, writing, and mathematics so that we as a Board of Ed can inform the town and the parents that we are meeting the goal of the educational system? So that's the final question that I asked during that. So just wanted to get them on the record here.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Jonathan, do you have any thing you want to say about that at this point, or do you want to research those answers and get back to Dan or the board?
Sure, I think I can concisely answer in 3 bullets. Symphony Math, Lisa's going to talk about at this Thursday's meeting of the Curriculum Committee. The issues about data analysis, we've already identified that Power School, which is used by the district, well, it's purchased by the district, could be used a lot more effectively for collecting, analyzing data, and the beginning of the school year, by which I mean really July 1st for administrative purposes, we intend to have a plan that will harness the existing software we already have for that. And in relation to reading, writing, math, science, some of those, actually any curriculum area, but those first core ones for sure, we have a robust plan for in our proposed budget, which is going really well for next year, for curriculum work and for specialists next year to assure the development of curriculum that will clearly document and report to parents exactly what assessments we're using, what we're gathering from them, and the process of developing that curriculum will also help us identify if there are gaps that we should seek to plug by some additional teaching, learning, or assessment.
Thank you.
The only one you missed was the grades versus standards thing.
Oh,
so
yes.
You have to get back to me on that. Or
I will get back to you on that, although we can talk about that Thursday, but the Power School integration is actually going to be essential on that as well, because we've learned through the analysis of data to identify the students for the learning loss program that we could be collecting and analyzing data much more efficiently and elegantly than we currently are in the district.
Thanks for that, Dr. Budd. Now, Dr. Budd, I actually have a procedural question for you. We're going to move on to the policy committee report, and we've extracted the 30-day review policies. Do we do that before the adoption or after? Does it not matter?
Well, I don't think it matters, but I have them on top. So if you want to do the 30-day ones first, it's all right with me.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to call on Megan Genovese as the policy committee chair, and you've got your marching orders, I think, Megan.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess we'll start with that. Let's go for it. So the 2 policies that were extracted, Jonathan, did you want to speak to those at all? And actually, I guess I wanted to clarify because I thought that we actually all agreed on the travel and self-quarantine during COVID-19 pandemic. So I was thinking, Dan, that you actually were okay with that one. So is it really just one of that? It's fine, we can talk about them both. But I just wanted to clarify which one that was the one of concern or they both.
yeah, so it's both, and I just wanted to make a quick comment on both of them. I'm going to vote in favor of both of them to put them on 30-day review. I wanted the public to know 2 key things about them that we discussed.
Okay. Jonathan, do you want to open with your brief intro about them? Great.
Sure. 5114 is a required policy on essentially student discipline required by the state of Connecticut. And key parts of this relate to due process, suspension and expulsion requirements. And most of these things are driven by state statute. So the last time this policy was revised was in 2014, and there have been 4 significant public acts that have revised these statutes in the meantime. And in essence, some of the key changes were out-of-school suspensions and expulsions have been vastly limited for students in preschool and in grades K2. Additional rights for parents and guardians for students who are going to have expulsion hearings have been added. And the standard to actually expel a student, which again is really for just grades 3 through 6, has actually, the bar has been raised. There are some additional standards that have to be met to expel a student. So for simplicity, what you're seeing here tonight, the changes are in red, okay? And all of those main points that I just talked about are woven through the policy in different ways. We really talked through them pretty deliberately at the policy committee. And that's what you're seeing here this evening.
Great, thanks, Jonathan.
So Megan, do you want to start with that one, and we'll have a motion for acceptance for 30-day review of that particular policy, and then a second, and then we can have discussion?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion to approve for 30-day review, policy 5114, suspension and expulsion due process.
I second the motion.
Okay, so Marcia, Megan made the motion, Dan seconded it. All those in favor signify by raising your hand.
I'm sorry, I thought this was what we were able to discuss.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Okay, you can fire me now. That's 3 things. Okay, discussion. Go ahead, Dan.
All right. So the only thing I want to bring up is section 4114.b.3 speaks on a hearing for a student who's been put out of class for multiple days in 1 week. And we had a lot of conversation about this in the committee, and so I just want to bring it up here that hearing is required by statute, which kind of gives it a formal sounding thing. And I wanted to ask Dr. Bud, we said that we added in that the parent prompt of this, we can have this meeting called a hearing. It's really just a meeting in the principal's office with the student happens. And so I just wanted to define, like, what does promptly mean? Is that, 2 weeks? Is that 2 hours? Is it, what is the definition of promptly as a parent?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And actually, the Second Circuit has interpreted that, which governs Connecticut, unless there's some compelling change by the Supreme Court. But the Second Circuit has been defining promptly as reasonably quickly as possible, given the facts and circumstances of the particular instance. So there could be a range of interpretation, which is why things like this go to the Second Circuit eventually anyway. But because this policy could deal with behavior as intense as bringing a firearm to school, and potentially as minimal as sticking gum under the desk, not to say defacing school property is fine, but because both of those things and everything else are encompassed in this policy, the promptness requirement by any reasonable administrator would need to be much quicker with that first example than with the second. But the facts and circumstances also have to take into the totality of the situation. So my firearm example won't work for this, but a slightly less intense situation might take a little bit longer if there were a bomb threat at the school that intervened. So promptly is as reasonably as possible, given the facts and circumstances. And I want to stress that the best practice of any administrator, and certainly we know that students learn best with this, is to engage the parent guardian early, often, and frequently in helping with a whole community approach to the child's behavior.
And then that satisfies me. That's what I'm really looking for, is that we're engaging the parents early and making sure that they're part of this as well. And because it's not like it's the first time the child's been sent out of the classroom 3 times in 1 week. So it's obviously something is going on, and we should be getting mom and dad, guardians involved, figure out what's going on with this kid that 3 times in 1 week,
And I would just add to that what we're all discussing here is that requirement for the administrator involvement. But before that, the best practice of the classroom teacher, which is in fact the practice followed, is that positive discipline approaches involve good two-way communication with the parent way before that point. So the administrator is going to be that level, but the teacher will have reached out earlier than that.
Wonderful. Any other comments? Mike?
Yeah, so I had a couple of questions regarding the definitions of especially firearms. So section 11 under those definitions, there's some added language in red defining what destructive devices are not. And so it says that destructive devices don't include antique firearms or rifles. And so from my first question is, why did we find a need to include that language regarding what destructive devices are not? And then my second question is, if rifles and antique firearms are not destructive devices, are they still considered deadly weapons? Basically the definition number 10 under that list.
I could answer that, Lynn, unless a member of the policy committee would like to, because we did discuss both those definitions. The basic reason that they were added was because the added language was in the CABE recommendations. We actually had 2 meetings of the policy committee this month, and your exact question was raised by some policy committee members at the first. So I went back and researched. The definitions are exactly in the law. Actually, Connecticut law on firearm cites the federal penal code, which has added that. And the reason the firearm definition exists at all is that the standard for firearm must be met for certain expulsion decisions by the board. So the board ultimately would have to be able to go back to this, assuming it's that kind of situation, and say, yes, it met this exact definition. And actually, all 3 members of the policy committee had said, well, wouldn't it be clearer if it were worded this way, or it seems to exclude things but then include them? But then we found that the law does exactly the same thing. So that's the answer as to why it's there. And in Beecher's history, my guess is we very rarely, if ever, utilize these definitions, which is great. But ultimately, if we had to, we'd be getting legal counsel involved with both the board and the administration and the parents if there were a dispute about whether something matched a definition or not. Does that answer your question partly?
Yeah, I think so. At least in part. I just want to make sure that there's not a some kind of odd loophole here regarding what's allowable and what's not allowable in schools. I want to make sure that that's absolutely clear. And this to me doesn't seem very clear, especially that part of the definition. It seems like maybe some of these things like rifles and like antique firearms would not be considered destructive devices, but maybe they're considered deadly weapons. I'd like some clarification around that, whether they would be considered a deadly weapon and whether the same kind of consequences would apply for bringing antique firearms and rifles into school. So do we have exceptions for any of those kinds of firearms or whatever we're calling them?
So, Mike, the destructive device is like things that have a charge that are not deadly weapons, i.e., the rocket, a rocket engine for like a model rocket, right? That it could be a destructive device, and if misused, could cause an expulsion. But a rifle is a deadly firearm, right? So I think that's where the confusion comes in, is that there's this class of things that are destructive devices that could be weaponized. And those would also cause expulsion, even though they're not firearms. Does that clarify it?
I'm really struggling with this one too. Part of it may just be a grammatical thing, because the first part of it says firearm means any weapon. Any weapon, number 1, 2, 3, and then it says or 4. So I don't understand why a rifle would be anything other than a firearm and a weapon as defined in bullet 1. So why are we bothering to talk about bullet 4 if it's already included within bullet 1?
And what I would say in response to that is that was the legalese that came down from the federal government and the state government to make this clear for the purposes of litigating this. So I don't claim to understand it, but that was the way it was required to meet constitutional, state, federal laws and make sure that firearms are an expellable deadly weapon, and that things like a destructive device is also.
Could I point to a couple?
I don't understand. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I just thought to illustrate it, maybe I could look with you at a couple of other pages of this policy. If you look at page 3, this is a long list of things that a child could be suspended or expelled for. But if you look at item A on page 3, you'll see how these things we're talking about get all grouped together. Possession of a firearm, deadly weapon, dangerous instrument, or martial arts weapon. Each of those getting defined in the other place. The other part I would look at is page 4. Because, Mike, I heard one of your questions to be a little bit about the implications of this. And here's why I think they're conflicting. I think Jeff Townsend talked about the same thing, that it's like anyway, why was it written this way? But if you look in the middle of page 4, this is mandatory expulsion. If you had a student who did what I'm about to read, letter F, number 1, and this comes from the state, the student on grounds or at a school-sponsored activity was in possession of a firearm as defined in 18 U.S.C. 921 as amended from time to time, or deadly weapon, dangerous instrument, or martial arts weapon as defined in Connecticut General Statutes 53A3. And then there's some other things you could be expelled for. But I think one of the problems we come up against is the way the state has defined mandatory expulsion. The first definition, firearm, goes to the federal penal code. And the other 3 examples, deadly weapon, dangerous instrument, martial arts, go to the state codes. And the authors of those 2 things, I shouldn't say they didn't communicate with each other, but my presumption is they didn't necessarily analyze to see if things overlapped. You could have a child who has something that's both things, the state statutes prohibit it and the firearm through the federal government.
Right, so it's a problem either way. They're just defining it differently, and then the way it's dealt with between federal and state might have different implications.
I think there are I'm nearly positive there are things that are firearms and dangerous weapons. Actually, I know that to be the case, right? But a child, you could be expelled for beating both of those things with what you brought in, or either one of them.
And if we were to expel a child and they were to sue us, and we didn't have one of the two definitions in there, then as this thing makes its way through the courts, we would end up running into a problem eventually. So having both definitions in there covers us both ways, because as we make our way from a state to a federal court, we have both definitions in there.
Okay, so that it's becoming a little more clear to me. It's just the
Sorry.
This is I understand why other members of the committee were raising
Why we
questions
had two
about
meetings, right?
the language here, because it's not. It's just it's not really clear as it's written to me. But just to be clear, then it does seem, based on what you've just read to me, that there is no exception to the rule of a kid getting expelled if they were to have bring a rifle or an antique weapon to school. Right? That's still grounds for expulsion along with any other firearm weapon. Is that correct?
Well, an antique firearm is not a destructive device, but it could be. I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Depending on how it's used, Mike, or how it's intended to be used, it might meet one of the other standards. But I just want to point out, I did read from mandatory expulsion, but the board always has discretion on mandatory expulsion. I read on page 4 from F1. However, F3 is the board may modify the period of mandatory expulsion on a case-by-case basis. So this board always, some boards, as you may know, have hearing officers that decide whether to expel students. This board in Woodbridge retains the power as a board. So something would come to all 9 of the board members as an administrative recommendation. But even if you got to this point and, oh yeah, it meets this definition of firearm, or in another example, it meets somebody distributing drugs, the board does have the authority to modify it on a case-by-case basis, taking the facts and circumstances into account.
Okay.
And that's required by law as well, that the board has to have that discretion. Whether you would utilize it or not is your decision, but you ultimately have to use the state's criteria to make the decision.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there any other questions about that policy?
Yeah, maybe I'm dense here. I'm sorry. I still really don't get it. Even looking at the law and like a quick search of like Connecticut statutes, clearly a rifle is a firearm. It's clearly a firearm. There's no question. So even if there are differences between the two statutes, state versus federal, I don't understand why we would add language that at least could be taken to imply that it was not being categorized. I mean, like if you just look at this paragraph, the way it's laid out, it looks like we're saying, oh, but a hunting rifle doesn't count. And that's silly. It's not, I don't think that's what it actually says or what it's intended to say, but we've added language that makes it look like here are the dangerous things and we're excluding these other things from that category of things that are dangerous. And I don't think that's what we're intending to say. And so putting that into policy just seems silly if that's not what the law says, nor what we're trying to do.
The state law is consistent with what you're saying. The federal law is not, and we're referencing both. So the federal law makes an exemption for those types of weapons. If you lived in Kansas right now and you went, this is exactly the example that was used during the policy meeting, right? If before school you went hunting and you had a truck and you were at a high school and it was locked and properly stowed by federal law in a state that allowed it, then that's that. But the state of Connecticut does not allow for that. It falls under the mandatory expulsion in the state of Connecticut. But we reference both because if we don't reference both, if it goes to law, if it goes to court, we're not going to have the federal law in there just to hold up against.
But that's not what this paragraph is doing. I mean, if there's separate statute that says federal law doesn't count a rifle as a firearm, I'd love to see that. What this sentence says.
Second Amendment.
I don't think it says that it's not a firearm. What this paragraph says is it's not category 4 destructive device. This is not making any comment on whether a rifle is a weapon, which is the first bullet point in the paragraph.
Dr. Budd, do you have anything else you want to add?
I may in a second. I just don't want to say something inaccurate either. So.
Okay, we'll give you a second.
Let me just say this. Let me say this so we don't necessarily prolong, which I'm not saying we're doing. David, what I'm doing, and I'm happy to continue doing it and not waste everybody's time, is the controlling piece on this is 18 USC 921, which is the federal definition of well, in this case, of many things, but a firearm. It also defines destructive device, and it relates those two. So we've looked at this a little bit in policy, but I'd rather not try to quickly read it again as the conversation is going on. But I can commit to you, I will do that again by the time this comes up. I would just offer one thing, which is if there are sentences in here, which we believe there are in everything we've added, that are required by the statutes, the value of including them in the policy is that it just puts everybody on the same notice as to what's prohibited. I suppose what's allowed as well. And so that we've given fair due process to everybody. We told you ahead of time, if you had this thing, the following could happen. But Lynn, my suggestion would be, I'm happy to look at that US code again. I'd just rather not do it while the meeting is going on, because I think it's hard to focus on both things at once, at least for me.
That's fine. So we have a motion and a second on the table. Laura, additional discussion?
Is there any way that you can get input from CABE?
Yes, this comes directly from CABE.
Okay, so
yeah. Would say this is their input because their model policy is exactly this for the definitions. And then when it was questioned at the first policy committee, we went back and looked at the statutes to make sure they matched what CABE said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and generally we do really try to line up as much as we can with the statutes and laws, so that way we know what they are and we
absolutely
following properly. So it's in line with how we usually do it. And yes, we all had lots of questions about this because it is very wordy and it's a little confusing. You kind of have to read it from top to bottom, and then it's like, okay. But yeah, it is a bit wordy, but I think it's what came as recommendations, and I think she picked it apart. And Jonathan did a great job explaining it. I think the committee came to a place where we felt like it did make sense to move forward, but we do understand everyone's concerns, and it is hard to understand if you're kind of seeing it in piecemeal too. So
yeah, it's a little bit like Alice in Wonderland. The more you look at it, the more it makes sense, but you start to wonder if your mind is going a little crazy as well. I just would say I think good questions have been raised again, and I'd be happy to look at 18 USC, but that's also written in very complex ways. Be happy to get back to the board on that.
Maybe I'll just comment as a policy member who did have many concerns about this initially, that at the end of the policy meetings, my decision was that I felt that the law was definitely written in a way that was not ideal, but that wasn't something that we could really change. And in particular, there's a very strange phrasing here of defining rifles intended to be used by the owner solely for something as an item, as a way of distribution, whether something is a destructive device or not, which entails that we need to know the intention of someone to know whether the rifle is or isn't something. But that's what the state law says. So I don't know how we can act in a way other than to work with what it says as a definition, even though it's upsetting for us in terms of having a clear policy.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Go ahead, David.
Procedurally, can you just remind us what the options are at this moment?
So right now, the motion is to place this policy on 30-day review, which means that at our May meeting, we could vote to adopt it or not adopt it. Is that correct, Jonathan?
Right. We're kind of 30-day notice now. We're just moving it on to the May meeting. And I think what I'm taking away from this is we want more clarity on what's been raised, which I think is totally fine, and provide that to you before the May meeting and also orally at the May meeting, and perhaps some adjustments in between if that's possible.
Right. And is it also true that the other option is to not adopt it or accept it for 30-day review, and it would go back to the policy committee? Is that correct, Jonathan?
Sure, that's another option.
Okay. Right now, the motion on the table is to accept it for 30-day review. So are we board? I don't see anyone else raising their hand. So all those in favor, I'm going to call the roll on this just because it's been a lot of discussion. So Joyce, do you accept this for 30-day review? Did she vote?
No.
No. David, do you accept this for 30-day review?
No, I'd like to hear more from the policy committee before moving it forward.
Dan, do you accept this for 30-day review?
Yes.
Jeff Townsend? Can you hear Jeff Townsend? All right, Jeff, we can't hear you. I'm going to come back to you. Jeff
Me now?
Hughes? Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yes, my answer is no. I don't.
Yes,
vote
for
it.
30-day
I think
review.
there are concerns on
I don't
number
know what he
four.
said.
I think those are justified. I said
Jeff,
no,
you have to,
so
no, not accepting it for 30-day review.
yeah, no.
Okay, thank you. Jeff Hughes,
Yes.
Lore,
No.
Megan,
Well, I'm going to say yes because we agreed to push it forward, but I do want to point out that there's no, even if it did get pushed to 30-day review, there's nothing stopping us from revising and looking at it more thoroughly. So I think either way, I'm happy to bring it back to the table. But I think the thing is,
Okay,
if members outside of the committee are interested in and have concerns, then we're going to have to get together with other members within the policy, because I think we had come to a place where we were okay to push it forward. So anyway, sorry, wrong place to have that talk, I guess.
that's okay. Mike, yes or no, 30-day review?
No.
Did he vote?
He voted no, I believe.
Okay,
I said,
Mike is a no.
I said no.
No.
Right, I'm
Mike
sorry, I
said
keep
no.
breaking up and losing you people. And I'm voting yes for to go for 30-day review. So Marcia, I believe that's a 5-4 vote for this policy not to go on 30-day review. So that motion did not pass. All right, moving on to, so that policy will go back to the policy committee, Dr.
So
Budd.
can we just talk quick about what our plan is for that then, so we don't just leave the meeting and then don't continue. So I think if it goes back to Dr. Budd, folks, I know that it's definitely, we agree, we had lots of questions about this policy, so I don't blame any of you for having concerns. We had to spend a lot of time with it. So if folks want to read through a little more thoroughly, I know it was a little bit quick right now, and pass questions on to the full committee, I think is acceptable, or just to Dr. Budd. I'm not sure if I'm thinking of this incorrectly, actually. We want to be careful we're not having a side meeting, I guess. So perhaps just to be safe, connect with Dr. Budd, and then we can go from there. But I guess we just need to be clear what issues what pieces exactly we need to be tweaking, because there's, a lot there.
Yeah, I would, may I then?
Go ahead.
Absolutely. And then after that, Megan will move on to, when we're finished with that, we'll move on to the next policy for 30-day review. Great.
Can I, what is oranges, the policy in orange for this same policy? Is it the same?
I'm sorry, Laura, I don't have the exact orange policy here. What's on my mind, though, and I just feel I should say it because I said it at the policy committee, is the board has a policy on a mandated topic that is 7 years old. And I believe there are many aspects of this actually
That's my concern.
that must be revised. And the board will have, the administration will have difficulty suspending students, and the board would have difficulty expelling any student for the concerns that have been raised without a due process policy. I cannot take responsibility for what happened in 2014, 15, 16, 19 that didn't get this policy revised, but these are statutory changes, and not having them in the policy that goes to parents and guardians will be seen as a due process problem when we come up. So happy to take that back to policy committee, but I would really encourage that the board come back to this one in May, because we're going to have issues implementing this policy as is in some cases, just for full disclosure and honesty with you, because I said that at policy as well.
Would it be appropriate to answer Megan's question about some guidance from those of us who voted no, so that the committee could discuss a little further? I think that we are supportive of having this policy. The one part of it that is a question mark for us is that language, which would seem very unclear to anyone who reads the language. And so if the intent of policies is to help people understand what is allowed and what is not allowed, I think the question is whether it could be written in a way that's very clear, but still, I guess, I don't know if legal has to weigh in, but do we need the language of the federal statute that contradicts what we're trying to say, which is it's not allowed, right? These destructive devices.
So the policy still does say these are not allowed. It's not saying that any of those devices are allowed, right? I mean, that's not the takeaway. I think it's just the way it's handled could be different. If you're looking at a device that's intended on destruction versus a device that can't even shoot a bullet. It was like an antique things and that had no intent to harm anyone, but it was somehow brought to campus or something like that. So I think they're differentiating those devices in that sense. But I don't think any of it's acceptable. That's not what it's saying. But you might react differently to those. The intent, having that.
Yeah, I think there's sufficient confusion that would warrant language that is much clearer. So I don't know. I just offer that as my personal thoughts.
I think we're going to have machinations forever, and we're going to end up that we're not going to be able to change it, right? It is the law. It is very much in line with when I say I don't like things, and I'm told by my fellow board members, well, that's the law, Dan. So it doesn't matter if you don't like it, it's the law.
No,
Okay.
I think it's a little different.
I think we have our that's for it to go back to policy. And if any board members have any input that they'd like to share, you can email as the chair and policy we'll put it on the agenda and we'll discuss it once again. Okay? Move on to the next policy that we're looking at today for 30-day review, which is the travel and self-quarantine
Sure.
policy.
Back to that
For the sake of time, I'll retract my, and I'll just say I support this policy moving forward because we've discussed the other one so much longer. So the comment I was going to make isn't all that important.
For the travel and self-quarantine?
Yeah, ultimately, the policy is fine and I support it. We agreed at the committee, and I don't think there's any reason for me to make a comment here.
Okay. Dr. Bell, do you want to speak to it? Just
again, make a motion.
Sorry, Lynn, I'm not able to hear you, but I think you might have been saying that I can make the motion, that I move to make a motion for 30-day review.
That is what she said.
Great. For travel and quarantine during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm sorry, the policy numbers are 4118.238 and 5141.81.
Yes. So I second that motion that we move those forward to 30-day review.
Is there any discussion about that policy?
I mean, just a quick overview. I mean, Dr. Budd can speak to it as well, but it was basically an intention to reflect the significant changes to the Connecticut travel guidelines that have occurred since our original was adopted in September 2020. And it makes it more concise. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. And basically that it gives resources to folks to be able to families and teachers and whoever else to be able to link into the resources through the CDC and Connecticut Department of Health to get the correct information in the real-time up-to-date information for self-quarantine and travel. So I think it was a great revision. Thanks, Dr. Budd. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, but I think it's possible Jeff has his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to comment that these things are under active review in the CDC, so it is a really good idea for us to just continually reference them rather than have an explicit thing in this policy.
Yes, agreed. And there is language in there for the policy committee to quarterly review just to make sure that the language still reflects useful language and moving forward. But we do think the way it's designed now, it will do that. So. Are there any other?
Megan made a motion.
Questions?
Yes, I think, Lynn, we had Megan make the motion and Dan seconded it.
Great. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. I think that will work.
I'm sorry, I lost
Mike,
audio for a second. I'm
hand
not
raised.
sure. I lost audio for a second, so I lost the last few seconds of what we're doing. We're voting to
on the travel and
on 30-day review.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Turn it up a little bit. Mike, did you vote yes?
Yes.
Okay, that was unanimous, Marcia. Wonderful. Okay. Megan, we're moving on to the adoption of policies. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I think I need to move to make the adoption first and then we'll discuss it, or we talk first. I'm confusing them now.
You can make the motion first.
Okay, great. I will move that we adopt 3 policies that we put up for 30-day review last. Do I have these right in front of me now? Sorry, I'm switching screens and not looking at the right one. Policy
Megan, why don't I read that?
I have it, Lynn.
And
Sorry.
then you can just make the motion. We need a motion to adopt policy 2111, equal employment opportunity. 4118.112, sexual harassment. And 2131, superintendent of schools as revised. Will you make that motion, Megan?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Laura? You made the motion. Laura seconded it. All those in favor? Oh, any discussion? Any discussion? No. All those in favor? That's unanimous, Marcia. Thank you very much, board members. Okay,
Yes,
moving on. Cable. Again.
So really quick though, I just wanted to mention for policy that our next meeting is scheduled for May 11th at 8 a.m. And I want to apologize. We never got to the equity and diversity policy on our agenda from April, but we met twice. And anyway, we had lots to talk about. So we put that on the agenda for next, and then we'll also be reviewing policies related to committees. Okay, so let me switch gears. CABE. So for CABE, we have a few things that
Excuse
it's
me.
going on.
Can we take a break? Can we just take a 5-minute break, please? Otherwise, I just need to.
Can we have these on report and then we'll take a 3-minute break?
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'll try to make it quick. Okay, so government relations, things coming up soon. Monday, April 26th is the Appropriations Committee budget, if folks are interested in that to learn more. The legislative wrap-up is coming up on June 14th, and that will give just kind of an overview of what happened, what are the implications, and how will our school be affected. I think that's a really important thing that a few of us should make sure that we're listening to. Although I know Dr. Budd will be on point with it, but it's always good to hear it for us as well. There are some professional development opportunities coming up in May. Sorry, I feel like we're having computer problems left and right here. So, well, everyone should be receiving these, so perhaps you can check your emails. But I know that there's professional development coming up in May. There's a diversity, equity, and inclusion program on May 3rd. There's a conversation with NSB Executive Director Anna Chavez about public education in 2021 on Thursday, May 6th. And I know there's another one, but it's not coming up on my screen right now, so I'm not sure where that went. So I apologize, but I can let you guys know about that later. And that's all. That's all.
Thank you very much, Megan. All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna, before we move to new business, we're gonna take a 2 to 3 minute break. Laura would like 4. Run, Laura. Okay, we'll see you back in 9:38.
We can hear you, Lynn.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need Jeff Townsend. I need Mike. I need David Ross.
I'm here.
Jeff Townsend.
I'm here.
David Ross. Mike. Wonderful. Welcome back, folks. Thank you.
Hey, Lynn,
Okay.
before we move on to the
Four,
next
new
piece,
business.
Lynn,
Has
Lynn, can you
something
hear
to
me?
say.
Non-renewal of certified staff.
Megan
Lynn,
has
Dr.
something to
Bud,
say.
I
do you
think
have a
Megan
few
is
things
trying
you'd
to
like
get
to
your,
say about that?
I do, but I think Megan may be trying to get your attention first.
Sorry.
Sorry, Megan.
Can you hear me, Lynn? I found the pieces that I wanted to share with the group, and they are important webinars. So I just wanted to share that before we move on. Sorry. They are webinar presentations for under a series they're calling Leaders in Action. The first that I had spoke about, and they're all around lunchtime from 12 to 1:15 in the beginning of May. The first one is Monday, May 3rd. It's called Names Matter, Continuing the Conversation. And that is presented by CABE's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. The next one is the one that I was forgetting about, is Wednesday, May 5th, and it's Preparing All Students for the Future, Addressing Learning Gaps of All Students. And so again, that's from 12 to 1:15 p.m. So that was the one that I couldn't find in my notes. So just wanted to share that because it looks like an interesting webinar that folks might enjoy for PD.
Thank you, Megan, for looking for that and for sharing it. Okay, now we're up to 4, new business, non-renewal of certified staff. Dr. Bud, I'm going to turn this over to you for the moment.
Lynn, I'm wondering first, I just got a notification from Marcia that she was, although I see her there, but Marcia, I just got a text that you've been knocked out, but maybe you're back in the meeting. So, okay, that looks like we're successful there. So to new business, Connecticut General Statute, Ms. Piasek, 10-151 requires that non-tenured teachers whose contracts won't be renewed for the following school year be notified by May 1st, which coincides with the necessary motion on tonight's agenda. The decision whether to non-renew the contract of a non-tenured teacher is within the discretion of the superintendent. Presuming no further reductions to our proposed operating budget, there will be some teaching vacancies for 2021-22, for which some of the individuals we name based on certification area may be interested in applying. However, the non-renewal notification by May 1st is still statutorily required. The fiscal year 2022 budget proposed by the Board of Education requires a reduction of certified staff consistent with the non-renewals presented to the board. And so, Ms. Piasek, I therefore must recommend a motion by the board in that regard.
Okay, Dr. Bud. Thank you. So I need a motion that pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 10-151, we accept the superintendent's recommendation to non-renew at the conclusion of 2020-2021 school year the teaching contracts of the following: Michelle Andrews, Sylvia Antonellis, Vicki Burford, Christine Campbell, Michaela Cardoza, Janet Criscolo, Krista D'Antonio Dimitro, Taylor De Silva, Madison Eucalito, Allison Limo, Michaela Natal, Rose Piscatelli, Robin Robinson, Elizabeth Russell, and Harley Ventura. Further, that the superintendent be directed to communicate this action of the board in writing to each, and further that the superintendent be authorized to respond on behalf of the Board of Education to any requests which may be forthcoming from each and or the representative of each pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 10-151. Do I have that motion? Joyce makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Dan Cowan seconded it. Okay, any discussion? Seeing no hands, I'm going to, for this one, I will call the roll. Joyce? Yes. David Ross? Yes. Dan Cowan? Jeff Townsend? Yes. Jeff Hughes?
Yes.
Yes. Lore? Yes. Megan?
Yes.
Yes. Mike Strambler?
Yes.
And I vote yes, it's unanimous, Marcia. Thank you very much, Board. Dr. Budd, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, Lynn, I want to clarify for the record that two of the individuals whose teaching contracts won't be renewed, Vicki Burford and Janet Criscuolo, have been providing outstanding service to us this year while on loan, if you will, from their typical assignments as teaching assistants. So I'm happy to note for the record that both of them will return to Beecher as teaching assistants next year.
That's great news. Thank you very much for sharing that. 5, public comment. So can we check and see if anyone has their hand raised for public comment? I see none. Dan says he sees none. Marcia, do you see anyone?
I'm not seeing anyone either.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I have a motion then to adjourn? Laura made a motion to adjourn at 9:46 p.m. Is there a second? Jeff Townsend? I'm disappointed in you, David Ross.
I thought it's
All
not
those
according
in
to the
favor?
agenda. I thought procedurally we were supposed to go to executive and then adjourn. That's why I was
No,
slow.
we're going to a non-meeting to discuss the negotiations. So we really need to adjourn. All those in favor? I believe that's unanimous. Ladies and gentlemen in the viewing audience, I want to thank you all for being patient tonight. I know there were a lot of internet issues. There was delay in talking and not syncing in some instances. So thank you for your patience. Board members, please remember that we have a non-meeting to discuss CILU negotiations. And there is a separate link for that meeting. Since we just took a break, we won't take a break. We'll jump right on. So I'll see you all in a few minutes. And thank you to everyone.